All right. Well, hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Kate Kaltenbach. I am Manager of Membership Engagement for CMA. So I have the opportunity to work with our partners and bring professional development and programming and webinars to not only our members, but to our industry at large. All in all, we hope to be bringing you resources and content that helps better your professional and your personal lives and makes our industry stronger every day. Of course, one of our incredible partners is the Touring Career Workshop. They've been so great at helping us bring really timely and relevant information to our members, of course, on topics that relate to the touring and the live event industry, but that really feeds into everything else that we do as an industry as well. So I'm really excited to be partnering with them. We, of course, have a whole host of upcoming events as well. If you're interested in checking any of those out, you can find them at cmaworld.com/programming. We have upcoming events with Touring Career Workshop, as well as some HR topics, some DEI training, and of course, all of our recordings are posted there as well. So feel free to check that out if you're interested. I'm really excited for today's conversation. We're going to be talking about diversity in the touring industry, certainly something that's important to all of us and really important for our industry to be mindful of. So I'm excited to hear today's conversation and to hear from our incredible panelists. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Chuck to get us started.
Thanks, Kate. And again, thanks to the Country Music Association for making all this possible. We discovered as we were getting into this that it's so broad that addressing all of this in just one session is not going to work. There will be a part two where we're going to have a chance to go into more depth and detail and also have an opportunity to address the challenges facing the LGBTQ community as it relates to work in our field. We're essentially going to try to hit four primary goals in this discussion today. And they are, A, to be empathetic and to understand the experiences of minority groups in our industry. B, to determine and quantify current bias and roadblocks to diversity in our industry. C, to begin and continue the conversation to make our workplace a better place by increasing that diversity. And then finally, to create a coalition of folks who are part of the solution, not part of the problem, within all levels of the entertainment industry. So from here, it's my pleasure to introduce the folks who have given of their to discuss this topic with us, and we'll start with Ernie Gonzalez. If Ernie could just give us a thumbnail on himself. Sorry.
Yeah, definitely. My name's Ernie Gonzalez, born and raised in San Antonio, Texas, but I have 1 foot in Nashville, one foot in San Antonio. I opened I own a recording studio. I'm a touring front of house engineer and system tech, we opened up in 1999. We opened a recording studio. I've been in the music business as a musician for many years, and just happy to be here. And thanks to CMA and thanks to the Touring Workshop for having me here today.
Thanks, man. Next, Charity Lomax.
Hello. A little bit of my background. I started in the studio world for 9 years. I was a booking manager at Westlake Audio in Los Angeles, and then got an opportunity to go on the road as a tour manager starting out, and then eventually transitioned from doing tour management to production coordinator. Did that for a number of years, and now I'm an artist relations rep for Jerry Harvey Audio. Thank you for having me, and more importantly, thank you for having this discussion.
Thank you, Charity. Next, I'd like to introduce Hollis Church.
Hey, Hollis. I own Dega Catering, a tour catering company. I've been in business since 1992 and started on the local end of things, and I've gotten to tour and never looked back. So we have our warehouses in Nashville, offices in Knoxville, Tennessee, and we've grown a little bit every year. So, and we're very happy to be working again after a year and a half. And I'm very happy to be part of this because it's been a huge, just a thing I've been thinking about for the last year and a half, especially, and I'm excited to be here. So, thanks.
Thank you, Hollis. And finally, David 5'1" Norman.
Yay, me. Thanks for having me. I am a tour director and tour accountant. I've been in the business for over 35 years. I've worked every genre of music, everything from country to jazz to rock. Um, I wanted to thank TCW for having us on, and like Charity said, for having this discussion, especially with the CMAs. And I am up in Nashville quite a bit. I'm also an adjunct professor, and I have led some classes over at Belmont University as well as Middle Tennessee State University. And I've known Hollis for eons, and I've known Charity. And Chuck, you and I have connected because we've worked with some of the same groups in the past. So thank you for having us on board. And Mr. Gonzalez, I would like to chat with you afterwards about some studio stuff.
Definitely.
So thanks for having me.
You got it. For everybody who's observing this, please feel free to ask questions while the discourse is going on. It doesn't have to wait to the end for the Q&A. A lot of those questions can actually feed into the conversation as we're going along. Let's start with the first question. And Charity, I'll throw this one your way. And that would be, has your race or sex affected your entry, growth, or access to opportunity in the touring field? And if so, how?
I would say my sex just initially very early on, like right out of school, I had tried to get a job with Showco, which I laugh about that now, knowing what I know. Yeah, I mean, I couldn't even get a courtesy call back, and the man who was doing the hiring at Showco at the time, I ended up meeting him several years later when I was working at Westlake, and I totally called him out. And I was like, hey, several years ago, you probably don't remember me. And he put him on the spot, and he was like, well, you have to be able to pick up a 250-pound cabinet and da-da-da-da-da. And I was like, first of all, nobody's picking up a 250-pound cabinet. And I was just like, you know what, you have no idea what I'm capable of, and just sort of walked off. As for my race, I'll be honest with you, unless I don't know about it, it has not affected my career at all. Most of the people that have given me the opportunities that I've been afforded have been older white men, to be quite honest, who have saw something in me and gave me plentiful opportunities. So for me, if I didn't get a job, I probably didn't want it in the first place. But as far as I can tell and I know, my race has not affected it at all.
Okay. David, how about you?
I try not to let it affect me. One of the things that I've always found, especially if I'm doing country or rock tours, people always say, are you the bus driver, the truck driver, or security? And, you do have some of those offhanded remarks, but I tell people, look, I'm just as capable as anybody else doing the job. As a matter of fact, I'm a lot more well-rounded because I work in all different genres of music. And I do my due diligence when I do get on a tour. I find out about the artist, I do my research with the management. So I give them no reason to use my race against me because I'm just as capable as anyone else. And sometimes I'm 10 times better than the average person, not to toot my own horn, but I make it a point to not let it be an issue. And if it does become an issue, that's on them, not on me, because I'm awesome. So.
Hollis, as a woman, have you had difficulties?
No, in considering that question, I really couldn't. I think that wasn't how I was operating. I was just getting work and saying yes to things. And since when I got into the business, there weren't very many, if any, other tour caterers in the United States. I mean, that's changed radically now. But I was just happy to be approached for it. And then as we kept working, then I got exposed to other people and just kept getting work. So if there were times where I felt like if I heard anything, or it was mainly just like, I've got a job to do, I'm not interested in that. And and I didn't run into it very much. And I've called, and looking at these questions, I've been calling, folks in the company and just saying, how about y'all? And yeah, we've just been working and getting the job done.
Ernie, perspectives from your side?
I can say when I first started out, I mean, I grew up in Latin music. I lived in Texas. That's what I do even now still. But when I grew up in Latin music, there was a lot of envy there. There was a lot of people that, yeah, we want to help you out, but in the end, there was another angle that they had for you, and you always kind of had to watch your back with that. You know what I mean? And when I started working for this one pretty decent sized company there in Texas, production company, I always felt like I had to prove my worth to that company more than the other people that were there. And finally, when I crossed that bridge where I didn't feel that anymore, it took maybe a few years to get that feeling out where, like, okay, now can I just be on the same gigs that all the other people are on? You know what I mean? That you've had your staff on, that now you're going to add me to those gigs after I've proved myself doing the, cleaning Sacco cables with a rag and Windex that have come out of a rodeo that have been sitting in dirt for 3 weeks, you know what I mean, by hand and stuff like that. And it was weird when I started working in country music. It was crazy because I had to get that mindset. It changed for me. Like, everybody was so genuine in Nashville, always willing to help, lend a hand. Hey, what do you need? Come over. People I had just met. And I was like, whoa, what's going on here? It was like shock, because I'm like, okay, what's your angle? What I got to do something for this. And it took me a long time, and I'm not trying to speak bad about it, but it took me a long time to change that mind frame that everybody's really trying to help everybody here. And where I came from and when I started, that really wasn't the case. And I remember the first job I had when I was in country. I worked for George Strait for 10 years, and the first week out on the tour, they told me, "Hey, we don't need to tell you anything. You know why you're here. You know your job. Show starts at 7:30. Everything needs to be up and running. That's it. We hired you because you know what you're doing. Period." And I was like, "Got it. Cool, I get it." And it's been it's been it hasn't been that much of a challenge anymore as far as my race goes, but there's always a time somewhere someone says something, or they forget to look in the room or something.
Yeah,
But we deal with it, and yeah, we deal with it. We laugh, and we help educate, and I think helping different races educate about each other, definitely helps, whether it's white, orange, red, black, whatever, it doesn't matter, We just, as long as we can talk about it and learn about each other, it definitely would help. Definitely helps everybody.
Well, Ernie, that was a perfect lead into the next question, which is there are blatant forms of bias, and then there are others that are much more subtle. And how does if you can share some of those examples, okay, of the difference between a conscious form of bias, or what in some ways is even more insidious, I think, for all of us, is the unconscious bias that you've experienced.
I remember there was this one, over the last 4 years, there's been a lot of talk, minority stuff, border wall situation kind of thing in the news a lot. So I remember a few years ago, I was getting on the bus to go out and do a show, and the news was on in the bus. Everybody was watching the news, and I remember walking in, and they were talking about what was going down on the South Texas border or whatever. And I walked in the bus, and somebody goes, "Hey man, do you see what your people are doing down there?" And I was like, whoa, what are you talking about, your people? We're gonna squash that right now. And we sat down and we squashed it out, because I'm like, nah, I ain't dealing with that. We're not gonna start that right now. So that was like, we had to put it into that, and then I had to educate. I'm like, do you really understand what's going on? I go, I live there. I live 3 hours from there. You know what I mean? And I just had to educate and really tell them like what's happening, what it's really like. And so I think just discussion can help with that for sure.
David, can you throw some examples our way of conscious and unconscious bias that pops up?
I think I listed a couple in my initial are you the truck driver, are you the bus driver, are you security? I, those I just kind of just roll off my shoulder because I'm usually the tour manager or the tour director or the accountant. So I'm just like, all right, well, you can think that, but I'm going to walk past you and go do my job because that's the important thing. So other bias is if people reach out to me for a particular tour and they don't know that I'm Black, they just have heard my name or saw my resume, and and then we get on a phone call or on a Zoom, you get this, oh, and then sometimes the conversation changes, sometimes it doesn't, and then I'm like, I'm the perfect fit for the job, so if my race is going to bother you, then you've got bigger issues that I even need to deal with. So, but those are just my small biases. Are you the truck driver, bus driver, or security? Because I'm a stocky guy, but I'm not stocky enough to be security or anything. So, oh, and I'll tell you one other one is if people talk to me on the phone and I show up and they go, "Hey, is 5'1" on the bus?" No, oh, I'm 5'1". No, it was a white guy I talked to on the phone, and I'm like, I'm 5'1". That's me. And they're like, no, I'm pretty sure it was a white guy that I talked to on the phone. So it's my voice, and people say, you talk like a white guy. I'm like, no, I don't. I just talk normal. I was born into a military family, so we moved quite a bit. So I think my accent's a little bit of everywhere. So that's the other bias. But I just brush it off my shoulder. I don't let it bother me.
Charity, you had mentioned in response to Ernie's comment about people not noticing who's in the room before they occasionally speak, and you had mentioned reading the room. Do you have an example of one of the ones where somebody's just not paying attention?
Well, I mean, it's just people get real comfortable, and I think when they know you, and it's like you talk about sitting on a bus, and they just forget like. Yeah, as much as we're all the same, Black, white, whatever, I am a person of color. And, they say something that's offensive and I'm just like, hello, me, whether it's about a racial thing or a female thing or they're, saying something derogatory, it's like, I'm still sitting over here. But one of the things that I wanted to point out when you talk about the bias, one of the things that I hear is, well, I think you'd be a good fit for this tour. Like, yeah. I'd be a good fit for any tour, but why this tour? Yeah. And I know speaking to my niece, who is a touring person as well, she gets that quite a bit about thinking that because you are of a certain race, you might be a better fit to work with this artist as opposed to that one. And then there's also when you talk to people on the phone, one of the things that happens to me a lot is I talk to people on the phone and they come in here for an appointment. And the audiologist that I work with is white, and they always come in and automatically assume that she is Charity, and I'm just somebody that's sitting in the room automatically. Or you talk on the phone and then they meet you and they're like, oh wow, okay, that's you. And then you also get the surprise that people actually, people have that air of surprise that you actually know what you're doing. Like, oh wow, I remember when I started on one tour as a production coordinator, and after a few days, one of the guys in the crew came and was like, wow, you actually really do know what you're doing. And I'm like, oh, shit. That's why they hired me.
I wouldn't be here.
It's just little offhanded comments that some of them you can just roll off your back, and then sometimes you have to school people. So, but I mean, it's one of those things that if someone making those comments opens up the door for me, to not let it roll off my back and to really educate them, then it's worth doing.
Charity, do you get the ones of, oh, you're so well spoken?
Oh yeah. You are so well spoken. Is one of your parents white? I get the gamut.
Now, Hollis,
I
as a
think
company owner, you're coming in under a slightly different cloak. But as a woman, are there people who are making either blatant or more subtle biases against you as you found yourself in the workplace?
Well, it was funny. I hadn't actually realized it until Ernie and Charity were talking that I often, very often, and I never even think about this, but if I'm emailing with someone about business, my name is Hollis, which is traditionally a male name. I mean, I've met female Hollises now, but people assume that I'm a man. It happens all the time. And I really let it roll off my back. But just in this conversation, it's like, oh yeah, they kind of do assume that the head of the company is going to be a man, even though there's, traditionally there are a lot of women in catering. That's just the way it is. And so, yeah. But otherwise, no, I mean, I have had, when I was touring, I have had those bus experiences, like you were saying, where everyone gets super comfortable and, you kind of find your way living with a bunch of dudes on a bus. But then at some point it's like, oh, okay, guys, just settle down.
there's got to be some boundaries.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, one production manager I worked with said he liked having women on the tour because it created a balance and created the energetics for boundaries, I guess, which I took as a compliment.
Yeah, valid point on that, I think. Has anybody here kind of raised your hand, I guess, has anyone here had to file a formal complaint on biased behavior by a coworker during their career? Ernie, you seem to pause on that.
Well, it's not that I didn't fill out the paperwork, but there was a discussion about it.
Right.
When I worked for a sports team, there was one day we were talking Spanish around or whatever, and this one of the people said, "Hey, you can't be talking that shit here," and I was like, "Excuse me?" He's like, "Yeah, you can't talk any other language than English in this building." I said, "No, I don't think so." I go, "Show me in the manual where it says that." And he's like, "It's in there." I said, "No, it ain't." And we went back and forth on this, and then I went to my higher up about it, and we had a discussion about it, but I never filed the formal paper complaint about it. But I mean, I wasn't the only one.
Was the support from above? Did you feel it was good?
I felt it was okay. He's still there. Nothing happened, basically. It was just, it was just kind of got talked about and swept under the rug, put it that way.
Okay. Yeah, I think a lot of work to be done in that area in a lot of places.
Mm-hmm.
Going to David, because I know you've been out with a lot of diverse acts in terms of not the makeup of their staff, but the multi-genre perspective. Do you feel more comfortable working, with a crew or for an artist that is of the same ethnicity or gender? Does that ever factor into it for you?
No, because again, coming from a military family, I was raised around different creeds, races, colors, religions. So and my parents always taught me to surround yourself with people from various backgrounds because it'll make you more well-rounded. And so I like being on a tour where we have Hispanics, Asians, women. I worked for Prince for several years, and one of his things, and you'll see that from the beginning, he always had women in his bands or on. He was very pro having different cultures within his groups. And I feel the same way. I work for a company here in Atlanta now called Six Man, which is we do cruise ship stuff, and our company is 75% female. And there's six to 10 of us of color, but the organization here is just, they've been super welcoming, super accommodating. So I like being around people of different races, creeds, or colors. And you can see I'm a stocky guy. So if a person is also a foodie, I like to go out and try different food and stuff. So I think that makes me more well-rounded in more ways than one. So I like being around people of different creeds, colors, and religions because I can learn something from everyone.
And Charity, you've been out with everybody from Queen Latifah to Aerosmith. You've certainly seen the breadth of what it can be. Are you comfortable in all camps, or is there a niche that suits you better?
No, I mean, I grew up not in the military, but just was around a lot of different kind of people. So I feel comfortable just about anywhere,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's never been a thing for me. I haven't done a lot of urban tours, but the one thing that I will say is when I do get in that environment, and I'm like, oh, I kind of feel like I'm at home. You kind of get that home vibe.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, I'm comfortable around anybody. I just want to work. It doesn't matter with who.
Yeah.
Cool. Ernie, as an accomplished Tejano music recording artist, you definitely have a home plate. But at the same time, you've already mentioned about Nashville. How does that question work for you?
It's I don't know. It's a tough one because I love Nashville. I love my Tejano stuff back home. That's my roots. That's what I do, and that always kind of keeps me grounded because not too many of us in the Tejano industry. It's a regional industry. Get to break out and go on the more national level, work with bigger artists, bigger tours and stuff like that. So there's very few of us that get to branch out and do that. So when I was able to finally start doing that, 15 years ago, I'd always get a lot of messages from, musicians I played with, other bands in Tejano, like, hey man, you're doing it for us. We follow you. And it's crazy because it's like, like I said, very few of us get to get out and take it to another level. So, I carry that on my shoulders for sure. And I always keep in mind that at any point, this could be over tomorrow, and I have no qualms, going back to doing a Tejano festival at a park or at a little place. Like, it doesn't matter. I can do that tomorrow, and it's fine with me, But I always keep that in mind that we're blessed to do this, and at any point it could be over in a minute. So.
Well, I think we all know it's magic, regardless of the size of the venue. I mean, we're really gifted with that. And Hollis, since we know it doesn't matter what music you're playing, you want to eat well.
We hope so.
And we know that everybody wants Dega food. So, is there a genre where Dega feels more at home, or has that been a pretty easy transfer as you guys have been out there?
We just love getting work. Like, I'm always of that mindset that, are we going to get work this year? Even though I've been around now for a really long time. Catering is the extra on tour. It's not like the lighting and sound and all the tech work. The show can go on without us. There's, in-house catering. So we're pretty grateful to get on any tour that we can. And
that was for in-house catering.
Yeah, well, that's definitely a two-way street on that one.
Well, yeah, but
the show
in our
on,
case,
but it's definitely not as good.
It's always brought up in our negotiations. We're the last thing that's hired on. because it's not the priority. But if there's maybe some money left in the budget, then catering could be considered, except for some tours where it is important. And we do have those tours and appreciate them. But no, I'd say I welcome work, and we all do, from anybody that wants us to go out.
Cool. We'll do the same circuit again, starting with you, David, and that's it. What ways has diversity increased or not during your career span? And some examples that you can think of.
Ooh, that's a good one. That's a very good one. Well, I think the previous administration that was in the White House really pointed out the politically how not only diverse our country is, but how separated our country is. I think that on one hand, it brought out some of the ugliness in some people, but I think on the other hand, it brought out awareness for everyone as a whole. And touring wise, I think touring is kind of like a microcosm of our society. So you'll see on tours now that there are people who want to have more inclusion, more females, more people of color, because I think that people really got woken up after these previous 4 years. I think that it's good and bad of what's happened. I think that those realms of those tours that want to stay primarily white only because of that particular genre of music. But I think that music, everyone loves music, and I like rock music. I'm a black guy. Is that unusual? Society, yeah, it's unusual, but it shouldn't be unusual. Everyone likes what they like. Everyone doesn't like what they don't like. So I think in the long run, I think it's getting better, but I think that we're a long way away from where it should actually be. Our skin or our race shouldn't affect anything, period. So sorry in that long-winded one, but that's just what I think.
Anyone else want to chime in on that topic?
I mean, I'll say real quick that. Go ahead, Charity.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Now, I'll just say real quick, like, as far as like people of different races or different color, I think at the end of the day, we all want to be in the position or get the job because of our skill level, not because we're going to be the token person on that tour, or we want to diversify our crew, and you would be a good person for that. I want to be the right person for the job, not because my skin is a little different color and you think that's better for the tour. I'd rather be the right person for the job because of my skill set and stuff like that. And I think that's what we all want, whether it's a white person or a black person or a brown person or an Asian person, whatever. We just want to be praised for our attitude, our great attitude, our skill level, and our skill set.
Okay.
I definitely feel like it's gotten better. When I started out, I usually on any given tour, I was the only black person, and maybe, depending on the type of tour it was, maybe the only woman. I know when I talked about Shoko before, which is now Claire Global, the person that does the staffing, who was an old Shoko guy, he and I talk about it quite often. Like, if he were doing the hiring back when I was a young audio girl, the whole trajectory of my career probably would have changed. Because he's like, I love hiring women. Like, women are great for all these other, we have a certain skill set or things that are inherent to us that men don't have. So he consciously is increasing the workforce with females for Claire. But I think in saying that, I think a lot of the people that do the staffing assume that a person of color is going to want to be on this type of tour, or they might feel more comfortable in this type of environment. And so, I was on a tour with 70, 80 people, there were 3 Black people on the tour. And it wasn't until I started doing this job with JH Audio that I've had to deal with so many different kinds of artists. I'm like, where did all these Black engineers come from? How did I not know that you were out there? Because they're always being put on the tours that I wasn't doing. You know what I mean? And I was usually on tours that were predominantly white. So I think it's on the people that do the staffing to stop making those assumptions and just put the right person for the job. Doesn't matter what they look like.
Yeah. 9 times out of 10, I'm usually the only Hispanic person on any of the tours I've been on, and I think it's changing. I get to teach at Blackbird Academy in the live audio program, so I get to see all the young kids that are coming up, and we've had a lot of women, a lot of females. We've had a lot of people from just out of the United States, different cultures, different backgrounds. We had, in our last class, we had a kid from Dubai who's fantastic. But I think in the next, 3 to 5 years, when they get out working professionally, maybe 2 to 3 years, there's going to be a lot more diversity in this field than there's been in a long time.
I think Nashville's doing a good job. Not to cut you off, one of the things because I have a window right here, so I see people going by. I think Nashville, I was surprised at the amount of diversity. Like, you've got some young Black kid, like mix of monitors for Chris Lane, like that to me is like, oh, so refreshing. And I think everybody thinks that Nashville is a good old boy, and there is obviously that does still exist. Yeah. But I think these younger artists like the Florida Georgia Lines and the Dan and Shays, they're bringing the diversity. They've got Black band members, they've got Black songwriters, Black producers and stuff like that. They're helping to diversify Nashville and country as a whole.
Yeah. And you see that in country audiences, there's been a real change in the demographic looking out from the stage. Yep. We're gonna shift a little bit here and go from, rather than what you've experienced and past history, and focus more on some solutions now. And to kick that off, and both Ernie and Charity were speaking to that, what creative ways can we use to proactively develop more diversity on our end? Thoughts? Hollis, you looked like, especially as an employer.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. When I was thinking about these questions, and thinking about my own company and our hiring practices, what I realized was that I'm a very passive employer in that people come to us. Like, we get applications for people who want to work. And from a staffing perspective, I look at all the applications that come in. I find qualified people that I think would be, fill the spots that we need, talk to them, and try to create some synergy in a crew. But what we're not doing, I realized, and this is why this has been so great, is I'm not actively putting my company out there in places where we might get more diverse applications. I mean, we're just employing people that come to us instead of taking a proactive stance. Like, I didn't even know about Roadies of Color United. That would be a great place for us to reach out to. And I was talking to, I now have another guy who helps me staff, and we were just talking about this yesterday because it totally turned us on. And that's a way I would like to proactively address it within my own company. Because we have a lot of women, but we are not very diverse. And I just have, I mean, really, this is embarrassing, but I was just trying to make crews and people who are interested in going and touring, who could cook and could live with people on a bus. I'm like, yay, please. So that's one thing we have been talking about, is to actively get our names out in community and organizations, online, so that people know we're there. And yes, we'll take applications. Can, please come tour with us. Can you cook?
Ernie, a question, because you had mentioned, just to a certain degree being a banner carrier for your community and your music, and having the opportunity to go outside of the area. Do you have ideas on better outreach for minority communities and being able to provide more opportunities there?
I think about it all. I try to think about that all the time, and I just try to. What I do personally is I try to pass what I learn over here back, bring that back home, and try to start, discussions about that. Try to open doors for other people, whether it's here in Nashville or if it's stuff I hear with other tours happening. Like, hey, I know the perfect monitor, a great monitor engineer that can definitely handle the strength of this tour. I'll always try to push people in certain places that maybe they might not have heard about the opportunity. I always try to do stuff like that, and anything I can like that, I always try to pay it forward.
Well, I think a common thread that is run through all of this that everybody has mentioned is just the thing of wanting to be hired for the ability, and not to fill a quota or to recognize the lack of diversity by making someone a token in our industry. Luckily, we all know the bar is pretty high on the level that we work, and people wash out very quickly if they don't have that talent. Hollis, you mentioned, Roadies of Color United, and there are a lot of other support and forum groups out there, Sound Girls and others as well. I think that I'm loving the fact that you discovered that through this, because I think that kind of interaction is going to be really important going down the road.
Yes.
I think that we're getting close. Let me see if we've got some questions that are coming from observers that we can throw at you guys. Bear with me one moment.
Man, the time has been flying by.
Yeah, no, it's zoomed by. While I'm waiting for a response on that, as a nation, and David brought this up earlier, I think not many of us, I think most of us, depending on which side of the aisle you're on, it still is almost unanimous that we're more divided than we've ever been before. But we're also an industry whose end product is bringing people together to share a common joy, regardless of what color baseball cap you're wearing. Do you folks feel that we have a unique opportunity to consciously further our own diversity and make that an example to other industries? And if so, how?
Ooh.
I'm going to throw that to David.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
I'm going to throw it to Charity.
Oh no!
I'll tell you what. Let me expand that a wee bit. Let's assume that one of the ways that we do this is utilizing Sound Girls, Roadies of Colors, and other groups. Okay, and how do we go about unifying those groups or engaging them to help unify our workforce without tokenizing anyone?
I think that it's just an initial reaching out and having a general conversation. First of all, that's another thing that I would like to see is us as a whole start reaching out to HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities. Another thing is I think that we should also start hitting students as they're coming out of high school, because a lot of times when students are coming out of high school, they don't know what they really want to do. They're just going to go to college, and usually that first year of college, they're still figuring out what their major is going to be or what they want to do. So I think if we can hit them right out of high school and start hitting the HBCUs, A lot of the Native American universities that are no one ever thinks about them are largely Hispanic colleges and universities, which no one really talks about either. I think that if we could just start reaching those, because a lot of times those kids don't have an outlet or have a path of where they want to go or what they want to do. So if we can kind of give them a roadmap of, hey, here's some opportunities, here's some different resources that you might be able to check out, I think that would help us in the long run in diversifying not only our touring world, but just the world as a whole. So high schools, HBCUs to help out like right from the jump.
Yeah, I had put that on my
Yeah, a
list
lot of
as
young
well.
people don't even know that these jobs exist. Like,
Right, right.
someone that loves to cook, as a younger person, I never even thought that being a chef on tour, like, I didn't even know that that was a thing. And if I didn't know
Right.
it, I mean, obviously there's a lot of people that don't know that that's a thing. I didn't know that a production coordinator was a job. Like, you have a tour manager, you have a front of house guy, you have a monitor guy. Like, everybody knows the big title positions, but there's so many other jobs that can be had. And like Dave said, I think getting to those kids when they're younger, like, hey, you want to travel around the world? You can do this thing and travel around the world and get to listen to music every day. Like, how amazing is that?
Yeah.
Gangs, we're gonna segue over to some of the questions that have been coming in, and we're gonna start with Maya Jones, who's throwing this out to everyone, which is, and we'll make it a two-part. How did you land your first job, and what should someone know who wants to get into touring in advance? What a foundation would be.
I'll start. I went to Full Sail, so my background is in audio. I wanted to be a front of house engineer, and I moved to LA. And my roommates in LA, my roommate was a runner at a studio, and just was like, "Hey, somebody quit." That's how I got my first job in the industry. After working there for 9 years, I got a job as a tour manager from a client that had come into the recording studio with a new artist that was going out on the road, and I was like, "I should do that job." And he's like, "Okay," and that's literally how I got the job.
Anyone else?
I
I got my
go ahead,
first job touring. I got into doing local backstage work because a friend of mine was a local promoter, and so we were just catering for tours that came through Knoxville, Tennessee. And David, that's how we met. And then one day I got some interest from the production manager of Bob Dylan about whether we might be interested in, hooking on for 2 weeks to see if this tour catering thing might work. And so, I carried myself. I got a truck. I put all my equipment in. We didn't get any sleep for 2 weeks, and it was awesome. and then we got hired. So it was a lot of work. But it was so much easier to be on tour than to be driving your own truck. So that was my first.
Okay, we've got another question that's come in, and it's a bit long, so bear with me because all the points are valid. As tours become more diverse, do we think that will drive more diverse people towards touring as a result of now seeing more people of color and females accomplishing these jobs at the skill levels that most tours require? Going off the earlier conversations about being hired for skill and nothing more, and the fact that a lot of people don't know that these jobs exist. And Charity touched on that earlier as well.
Mm-hmm.
How do we get the word out to people who don't even know about a Full Sail or another educational program that will allow them to build a foundation in any of the myriad of fields that we have out there?
I don't know if schools still do job fairs. Even just like simple stuff like that. I know for me, the way that I found out about Full Sail was a radio ad. Do you want a career in the music industry? Yes. And then I just did my research. But I mean, I know that they reach out to high schools and stuff like that. They do that kind of outreach. So I think those type, degree programs, I think that they need to do the outreach. And as for seeing people that look like you, that's huge. And I think for this younger generation,
Yeah.
I think more so than what I needed, I'm a lot older. I think kids need to see people that look like them, and it really drives like, I can do that. Like she's doing it, he's doing it, I can do that. I think it's very important to see people that represent you.
Yep.
I think now that's more important. That's really important with this generation, is to see people that represent you doing high profile jobs, big tour jobs like that, and that definitely opens the door to like, man, I can do that. I just got to take the steps to do that, and now there's somebody there that I can maybe reach out to as a resource, and not feel timid or uncomfortable reaching out to.
Some of my students that I teach is during the pandemic. I implored them that, hey, during the pandemic, a lot of people are just sitting at home, like Charity's sitting at home. I'm sitting at home. Some of my mentors and some people I look up to. I said, hey, why don't you guys just reach out to them? Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, whatever. Look them up, because 9 times out of 10, they may respond back, or they may not respond back. But if you reach out and just say, hey, can I have like 10 minutes of your time just to pick your brain? And I know a lot of my friends have heard me say this. The worst thing that could happen is that you don't get a response, or someone says, I don't have time for it. But the most beautiful thing that could happen is they said, sure, let's have a conversation. And that could lead you down the path of mentorship, internships, possibly getting a job. So during my time, I have like some of my heroes in touring. I just tracked them down on LinkedIn and said, hey, can I just pick your brain for 10 minutes? And man, just the wealth of knowledge and wisdom that I got just by talking for 10 minutes. And I implored people, if you want to reach out to probably any of us on here, that, pick our brains, whatever's left of them. But, we're here for you. We're a wealth of information right here.
I agree with that. And I think that, I was just going to say, I think social media is going to be huge for getting young people to know that we're here. Personally, it's challenging for me to think in terms of social media. I'm just now getting into Instagram. But, that's what's going on with younger people. And I think that's going to be huge to get the word out for any of these wonderful organizations that are coming up, or just that this exists. So I hope to learn how to practice what I'm saying. But I do believe in it.
Yeah. Well, I think for y'all that would be great, because there's a lot of people that go to culinary school and think they're going to go straight into a restaurant or owning a restaurant, and then not knowing that they can do this on the road in a different city every night. Like a lot of them would be more inclined to do that. And I think catering companies building their presence on social media would be huge for all of them, for more employees to come in and reach out that way.
Yeah, I've thought about culinary institutes, just getting all the resources and putting our names with them, because they do. Yeah. People will find you if you're out there.
Oh, yeah.
So, it takes the outreach.
Definitely.
I think one of the benefits possibly of the last year and a half, which we know have had a lot of negatives, has been the influence of social media, and really attaching greater worth to it, because it was the only conduit that people had to communicate with. So we need to wrap it up, because this has gone so quickly. And thank you, Jonathan Carrizales, for that question, because it was a great one. Are there areas or experiences that have been encouraging to you from a diversity standpoint? I mean, do we see not necessarily light at the end of the tunnel, or a real glimmer of hope? And I think it's a continuation of, what we were just discussing, with social media and the others. Are we moving in a positive direction as a wrap up on this?
I think
think
they are.
so.
Just the simple fact that
I
we're
believe so.
talking about it. That's a move in
Right,
the right
exactly.
direction.
And with
Yeah, the fact that we're all
organizations like
here is
Roadies
definitely
of
a positive.
Color,
Hmm.
yeah, Roadies of Color, Diversify the Stage, Live Nation, Crew Nation Urban, all of those things I think are great.
Yeah, I think that, to me, I think one of the real keys is that we're at a stage right now where there are all of these forums and support groups that are able to speak for those who haven't had a voice before. But the next solution is, how do we begin to work together, that each of those groups, each of those disparate groups comes together so that there's some sort of umbrella or rainbow function to it within our industry. Because again, I think that each group, I've learned a great deal just as we've been putting this together about all the different ones out there. And how do we move ahead to a place where everybody gets to come to the table and express their needs in one forum? And I'm not quite sure who would take the lead on that, whether it would be Polestar, it would need to be something genre broad. Really grateful to CMA for kicking this part of it off.
Yeah,
But
seriously.
Yeah.
if you guys are game, I'd love to continue the discussion offline as we go forward and we start getting feedback from viewers on this.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So I think this is an interesting one that just came in. And how would you like young and new music industry people to help with diversification rather than just being given the opportunity? What would you ask of young folks coming in today?
If they get into it, pay it forward and bring someone else up as you're coming up.
Yeah.
Another female, another person of color, bring us up, because that's how we're just going to continue to keep diversifying and including women, not only in this entertainment field, but life as a whole. So bring someone up with you as you're coming up.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's time to wrap this up. We've got 4 take-home points, and I think we've touched on all of them a little bit. But one is to keep the conversation going in whatever community you're a part of. Be aware of your own actions and the actions of others around you. And in reaction to, speak up and speak to it. Don't be silent. Being here today, joining these types of calls and discussions in the future are all part of it. And on behalf of CMA's TCW and Devon and Jess, who's nobody's gotten to see, who are running everything from behind this, thank you so much for your time and all your perspectives.
Thank you.
Really greatly appreciate it.